It's the lecture 183 through 195. Starts out with Congress in the West, and the Articles of Confederation are still in play. So the Confederated Congress took several steps to establish jurisdiction in the West. They negotiate treaties, they have Native Americans to get their land, they pass ordinances, three ordinances: Northwest Ordinance, Land Ordinance, and the Southwest Ordinance. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Northwest Ordinance so that it would include an anti-slavery clause. The Southwest Ordinance does not include the anti-slavery clause. So the Southwest Ordinance is the same thing as the Northwest Ordinance, except for the fact that it's missing the anti-slavery clause. Okay. The first one that was done was the Land Ordinance of 1785. This sets up this grid system right here, which is 6 miles by 6 miles by 6 miles. Each individual square is 1 square mile or 640 acres. Okay, and so when you used to have to buy land, you had to buy 640 acres at a time. And so it was really expensive, even $1 an acre at $640. It's a lot of money. Okay, a lot of money. And so you won't see a big boom in land and people moving until we drop the price of land significantly. Okay, but in the land ordinance, it sets up this grid system and how we grid out every piece of land in the United States for sale. The Northwest Ordinance puts forth the model for incorporating future territories and eventually states. 10,000 gets it you as a you have 10,000 people in your area, you can apply for a territory. You have 50,000 more, so 60,000 total, you can apply to be a state. So again, as I stated, the Northwest Ordinance sets up all these guidelines written by Thomas Jefferson, includes anti-slavery. The Southwest Ordinance includes everything else except for the anti-slavery clause. Okay. The Confederated Congress is unable to resolve major conflicts with Great Britain. So we got problems with Great Britain. We have problems in the fact that we still don't want to pay our debt. The treatment of patriots, of the loyalists, treatment by the patriots of the loyalists, excuse me, and the British used to maintain their hold on Western forts. So they're not leaving. So those are our two major problems with Great Britain. Spain refuses to recognize our southern and western boundary. They deny us the free navigation on the Mississippi River, and then the separatists who are out there on the frontier, who don't want to be a part of America anymore, they're kind of trying to divide the loyalties of Westerners in that fact. So it's a big old craziness, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it because we're too weak. We gonna start a war? Okay, this is supposed to be our land right here. This is all supposed to be our land. What are we gonna do? Fight them for it? We'll lose. Okay, they draw this line. Well, so what? We'll end up setting a boundary with Pinckney's Treaty in 1795 much later, and we draw this. But that's the original line. But they're going to do whatever they want because we're too weak to even stop anything. So they're just going to take it. Nationalists everywhere saw that everywhere there were problems. Problems. So they know they need to take action. Okay. So we'll go over that stuff in just a minute. I'll go back to it and let you see it so you can pause it and read it again if you want. But they go meet George Washington at his home in Mount Vernon, and they decide they need something new. Okay. So they call together a convention at Annapolis, and it was attended by 9 states. And those 9 states decided they needed to have another convention in Philadelphia, known as the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, in order to modify the Articles of Confederation. All states except for Rhode Island sent a delegate to what is now known as the Constitutional Convention. The Philadelphia Convention of 1787 and the Constitutional Convention are the exact same thing. We just now have history behind us, so that we now call the Constitutional Convention, the Philadelphia Convention, the Constitutional Convention. Delegates are largely lawyers, super smart, extremely well educated. Most served in the Confederated Congress, so they have experience. 1/3 had fought in the Revolution, so they are veterans of war. Okay, and they have a lot of money. The other thing that's not on here is they're young. Okay, we're not talking about teens, but we're talking about 30s, average age like 35. I mean, that's key because they're going to be around for 25, 30, 40 years helping us run the country. Okay, they're in it for the long haul. Congress, as I said, had only authorized a revision of the Articles of Confederation, but delegates quickly moved to replace it. First thing they do is they put Washington in as unanimous uh, presiding officer of the convention. Unanimously, they can't have anything unanimous, but they make him unanimously the presiding officer. So the big states all kind of get together and they come up with what's known as the Virginia Plan, which is a new national government with two houses, one executive, one judicial. And Congress had greater legislative powers and made representation in Congress proportional to population. So the big states love this. The little states all get together and like, no, 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 no. We like the small state plan, which is the New Jersey plan. One state, one vote, one house, not two, one house, multiple executives, and a judiciary. Okay. Now the big thing about slaves, Virginia's like, yeah, we want to. The Virginia plan said slaves need to be counted for population purposes, and New Jersey plan they don't even recognize this because they don't care. It's one state, one vote, and they're fine with that. So then comes along the Great Compromise. Okay. So they said we're going to have equal representation provided in the Senate. Each state gets two senators. Proportional representation in the House of Representatives based off of population. Okay, and then New Jersey goes, okay, you want to count those slaves as equal members? You go ahead and do that, but then you're going to have to pay taxes on each one of those members. And then Virginia goes, oh, no, no, we can't do that because we don't want to pay taxes on every single one of our slaves. So they come up with what's called the Three-Fifths Compromise. And the Three-Fifths Compromise says that for every three slaves, for every five slaves, it counts as three for population purposes as well as taxing purposes. So if you want them to count for population, you got to pay taxes on them. Oh, I told you I'd go back. Let me do that real quick. Annapolis Convention, Constitutional Convention, which was known as the Philadelphia Convention, Constitution of the United States, doing right now, Virginia Plan, New Jersey Plan, and then the Great Compromise. And if you were in class, we made that big, huge T-chart in class. The issue of trade legislation is solved with the compromise because they all work together. They just need a simple majority of Congress to enact any trade legislation. Okay, any law, simple majority. You get a simple majority, you're good to go. It becomes law. Well, one other step, but we'll get there in just a second. But it also barred Congress from acting against the slave trade for 20 years, the importation of slaves for 20 years, for the simple fact that South Carolina wanted to keep importing slaves. Washington was likely the first president, so the delegates provided the chief executive with broad discretionary powers. Not a whole lot of rules for the president. As our government grows and grows and grows, those things change, but the president can knock down a law. You get simple majority by Congress and it goes to the president won't sign it. He can veto it. Then it's got to become a 2/3 majority in Congress. Okay? So I mean, pretty simple to become a law as long as the president's going along with it. But if the president doesn't go along with it, he's just going to veto it. The Constitution provided for a strong executive branch, the president, okay, which the people elect, a Supreme Court, which the people elect the legislative branch. So the president chooses a Supreme Court justice. Supreme Court justice has to be then confirmed by the legislative branch, by Congress. Okay, and now another checks and balance along with a law is if legislative comes up with a law, the president signs the bill into law. Through judicial review, the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, can knock down a law. Okay, so I mean, it's got to go through all three steps in order to be a law, stick a law, and stay a law. And this balances the national government. The relationship between states and the federal government is known as federalism. Okay, federal laws are followed by the states. Most state laws are not followed by the federal government. But almost every federal law is followed by the state governments. There are laws that start out as state laws and then get passed on to become national laws. The seatbelt law, for example, it was started out as a state law and then it became a federal law. Smoking in buildings is not a federal law. It is a state law because Nevada, because of the gambling industry, has held out on that. Most of the time, state laws don't go against federal laws, but we do have one that's going on now. The federal law is marijuana is illegal. But there are now more states that have legalized marijuana in some form or fashion, medical or just outright legalization of marijuana, than there are states that have outlawed it. So what the federal government is saying is they're saying, all right, this is a law, there's a federal law out there, but we are going to kind of pull back and let the states choose what they want. Let the people choose. Okay? So very interesting argument with federalism. Chart differences between articles and the Constitution. All right, so we have two groups that come out of the Constitutional Convention: the Federalists, who support the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists, who support the Constitution, but they're opposed to ratifying it until there's a Bill of Rights Act. Okay, the Federalists were skillful. They built momentum for ratification, and they wrote a whole bunch of papers, essays, that allied the fears that the national government would be too strong. Okay, so the Constitution gets passed only after the Anti-Federalists get promises from Washington that as soon as this becomes law, they're going to work on creating the Bill of Rights, which is what they wanted. They wanted people's rights involved here. Key to ratification was the passage and the signing by Virginia and New York, followed then by, which were the two biggest states, which gave it our 9 votes to make it 2/3 majority, which gives it to where it needs to be. But then North Carolina in 1789 and Rhode Island in 1790. And that's it for 183 through 195.